I wonder how COVID has affected the pickpocketing industry. Have you thought about that at all? Like, if there's fewer tourists, who are they robbing?
So, no, how does it affect? Enormously. I can tell you that crime around the world, and by that I mean diversion theft. That means that grabbing a handbag, focusing on a very expensive watch that some celebrity is wearing in the streets of Paris, going on a tour in Tanzania, being on a bus in Cambodia. Everything around the world has changed because of COVID. Three reasons. A, they're more desperate. So the difference between have and have not is larger. Number two, there are fewer opportunities. There aren't as many tourists to rip off from. And the anger, and I should say the technique has changed enormously.
When you say anger and technique, do you mean people are more aggressive? Thieves are more aggressive?
Yes, correct. You could say that pickpockets, thieves, if we're going to start with them, and then you know we have muggers and guys who go into the hotel rooms, or those who simply are looking at the PIN numbers on your credit card in order to max them out later. So there are many fields here that we can talk about. But pickpockets, yes, they can be put into 3 or 4 different categories. The skillful ones that are ashamed of what they're doing for whatever religious beliefs, but they unfortunately got on this road. Then you have the youngish one who couldn't care less about some moral compass. And then you have the ones who get out of work and some older guy is saying, hey, I want you to be part of the team. They weren't thinking of going into crime. So all of these people behave different now. Some are very aggressive and angry, and others are saying sophisticated pickpockets, for the time being, are not stealing. They are going to other countries to work in menial, boring jobs, sorting things, tracking boxes and moving them and whatever. For example, inside EU. Here in the United States, sophisticated pickpockets, they are going to stop being out on subways and hotel lobbies and so forth and kind of focus on other type of crime, basically over the internet, scam you one way or the other.
That makes sense. And you pickpockets for a living, but not in the way people might think. Tell me about the stage show that you used to do. You can't do it now, right? Or can you?
Obviously my road forward, I can do a very short version and I can do a little longer one, and we'll see. The short version is that as a teenager back in Sweden, that's my accent, that's what you hear.
Okay.
I was fascinated with audience participation, comedy, magic, pickpocketing. Saw a very good French guy when I was 18 years old. When I say good, I mean professional on stage. He was my mentor for a while, and that led me into performance. But my family, on one side, my father was a judge and very, shall we say, correct, never jumped the line or the queue in order to get first in line for a ticket, always behave just the way you should. My mother, on the other hand, used, shall we say, finesse and slightly, in my opinion, morally incorrect ways to move forward. It wasn't stealing, but just to give you an example. I'm 6 years old and I had to tag along to the market, and she's buying strawberries or blueberries. She would look at 3 boxes and she would take a few rotten tomatoes or strawberries from one box, put them on top of another one, take the box up, give it to the person behind the stand and say, look, they all rotten. Can I get them for 1/3? I can still use them for some marmalade or whatever. And the guy would take a look at them and said, yes. But of course, she did this to manipulate the price down. They weren't all rotten, just a few at the top. I was so embarrassed to walk along with her, whether we were doing any kind of shopping or whatever. She would have things over the phone, how to move forward and get the ticket for half the price or for. So I learned, shall we say, social engineering, manipulating a mindset. And I knew on the other side, my father, which was the direct opposite. That gave me an insight early as a teenager the manipulation of minds. So when I came out to Asia as an entertainer and as a photographer, I noticed that I was hanging with a few bad people, not because of desire, but because the cheap hotels where we were during the Vietnam War, Hong Kong, Saigon, and so forth, that's where these shall we say, con artists were hanging. So by the time I was 23, 24, I was pretty good at analyzing the bad guys versus the good guys. And then I stayed nothing with law enforcement, just as an entertainer. But I had the backdrop of seeing and having friends who were, shall we say, of some form of another con artist.
Mm-hmm.
When I came to Las Vegas to work, and at that point I would do little presentations on the side. I was in a casino for a long time, and I did presentations for the police, showing them how pickpockets operate, and they loved it. And so then when we had 9/11, we had a lot of suspects that the casinos were very concerned about. And when I say suspect, I mean people who were pickpockets, but had American pickpockets, but of course the casinos were concerned with grabbing them as quick as possible. They were very often grabbed by Muslim extremists in prison, turned not into becoming terrorists, but in the thinking process. So American law enforcement were very concerned with fingering and knowing exactly where were these individuals in the United States that could possibly be turned into extremists and do the bombing.
Why were they worried about the pickpockets becoming terrorists as opposed to like a gang member or some other regular criminal? What specifically about pickpockets is radical?
Well, very good question. And unfortunately, it's a long answer.
Okay.
So if you take, for example, most of the bombings in Europe, whether it is in Paris or in Spain or in Rome, they all had or I should say, not all of them, but the ones that were caught or the ones that died in the incident had prior arrest records, very often in diversion theft or in dealing with drugs or breaking into homes. You know, you don't have a regular guy who wants to work for Google and is an internet guy, and the next day he says, yeah, I kind of fancy the whole idea of Muslim Islam extremism or mistreatment of our race. So you are already in prison. The guys who are serving time for the imams to put their hands or claws into these people and turn them was easier than a regular guy. So for that reason, they suddenly realized that I had a skill set, and I'm talking about now law enforcement in Las Vegas, of talking with these. So whenever they arrested a pickpocket in a casino, they would say, Bob, we have a guy, he's yours now for 24 hours. See if you can find out who is controlling, who is doing this, who is whatever. And this is a long time ago, 9/11, of course, so whether or not Miranda rights were broken or not, we don't know. What we do know is Las Vegas was concerned about finding out where this extremism were going, because they didn't, of course, that the 9 guys who were caught all had been in Las Vegas some weeks before the attack. So I became good at talking to these guys, building a trust factor, getting into the headspace. So when they were let out and they were going to the mosque, I would sometimes try and help them find new work. I would be friendly with them in restaurants and building a network. From there, it built and built so that when I work, for example, in Europe, for various law enforcement agencies, we have small groups that meet every 6 months, and we try and look at what's the latest detail. Today, it is not so much about extremism as to seeing the internet and where they are developing skills that are hard to penetrate. How the hell do they succeed in getting the PIN number if they steal a credit card and maxing it out? But should you understand the journey from entertainer into law
Yeah.
enforcement, or do you feel there is a gray area here?
No, that makes sense. I know you did a stage show for a while where you would steal, I don't know, ties and watches or whatever.
Yeah.
You told me a long time ago that you can't steal a Rolex at a stage show because you have to break it. Is that you who told me
correct.
that? Yeah, okay. I do remember a few things.
Yeah. No, it's true. But, there's a little more to that. Today versus some years ago, now you have certain gangs that specialize in stealing the three most expensive brands of watches, and Rolex happens to be one of them. There are a couple of others that are way more expensive, and only certain wealthy, shall we say, I'm not going to say the word stupid here, but ignorant celebrities who think that wearing a $90,000 watch in a bar in Rome is going to attract people around and it's going to be really cool. And look at me, I can afford a watch. And they're clunky, they're big. There's very few of that price range. So the gangs realize that if they can get this watch, they're going to have to track him. Maybe he goes to a nightclub. Maybe he drinks. There are a couple of seconds where they can narrow him down, depending on who is around them, and open the clasp. He's going to feel it, but breaking the strap and ripping it off and running and having a girl or two breaking him from dashing after in between. Choreographed scenario, but they walk away with a ton of money. So that is, do you want to call that mugging, stealing, or do you want to call that, just to give you an example, in Naples in Italy, I became friendly with a gang there through the police that put me up to it. So when I would come back, I would say, can we go and see this guy? Because he was in charge of the gang that stole only Rolexes. That's all they did. And it was similar to the way I explained it, but a little bit more smart and sophisticated. They could do it with one hand and twisting it off. When I went to these guys and asked them to show me the way they put their fingers on, so the main guy was now in prison, but his son was doing it. And they would show me precisely the move and the grip and what models. So Rolex became hip to some of this thing, and they strengthened the metal bracelet around, and you had to do it with two hands, versus before they could do it with one hand.
It's impressive. I mean, it's a game of cat and mouse between these thieves and then the luxury company and the watch manufacturer and everything like that. Where do these guys sell it? Because I'm like, where do I get a $90,000 watch for $40,000? That's my next question.
I'm going to say to myself that if I were an insurance company, I would be very concerned during the COVID times, whether it was a real theft that they walk off to sell it, or whether it was part an insurance scam. Doing all this, the cameras are here, it's proven it was stolen, but was it an insurance scam? All right, so the question of where they sell it, there is a secondary market for this. Certain Russian states, certainly Dubai. There are a few hotspots where they couldn't care. I mean, there is a market in Paris and in Rome on Sundays, open air market, where very, very good watches are sold. Now, I am not saying that all these very expensive watches were stolen. They were probably estate scenarios, but so they have a real history, because good watches inside have a serial number. And if you are a Rolex owner, for example, you will register it, and Rolex will know. So now if the Rolex needs for repair, you have to go to certain stores in order to have it repaired. Not anyone can open it up and look and fix it. If it's in this list, right away they know this is a stolen Rolex. So there is a way to some extent. But if you bought, let's say, a $16,000 Rolex secondhand that is, let's say, 15 years old, average price on a really high-end Rolex, somewhere between 16 and 25,000. The guy who buys it in a dark market he knows that he's going to be a little careful with where the hell he has it serviced and what he's doing.
Yeah, you bring it back to the same place that you bought it from to get it serviced, or they just give you a new one.
Not necessarily, because that might be in that open air market.
Yeah, you might never see it again.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But you know, part of it is a game, and I'm going to say that the moral fiber of the person who bought it, he's only concerned with that when he's flying and when he's in the bar in Monte Carlo or whatever, you know, with the green face on the Rolex, he's holding it up, and the people around are saying, "Wow." There are also, on the top tier of these type of watches, there are probably 6 times more fakes than there are real ones. So if I go to, let's say, north in Italy, some famous restaurant in a fashionable area, the waiters will have this Rolex watch. You know, there's no way in hell that he can afford it, but he bought it a fake.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And look, I'm not judging them. I think buying a fake Rolex, if you're going to buy a Rolex, buy a fake one, man. If you lose it, you get another one for $12 in Chinatown. Why buy the real thing unless you really need
Except that, you know, a $16 or whatever you pay for the fake one, I don't know if it holds up for 2 years.
Doesn't matter. I'll buy a new one every single year for $16. No problem.
I also think that it's a little bit silly. I mean, I bought a few Cartier fake one for the fun of it. In Turkey, by the way. They were very, very good. They were expensive. They were probably $300. And sometimes when I bring them in for service, various watches or new battery, the guys who are expert, they can't tell the damn difference. It's absolutely impossible. Well, what it comes down to is the people who make them may be as much of a connoisseur as the one who make the real. So, for example, when the watch industry, now we're shifting to a different subject matter here, but if you take Swiss watch, shall we say, repair people who work for some of the finest factory, they turn 55 and they're not getting quite the retirement, whatever it is. Chinese company comes in and say, how would you like to work in the, you know, in some famous city off the main Beijing, whatever city that are fashionable, and they get 3 times the money what they did in Switzerland, and they're told to repair and fix, and they're connoisseurs. So you could say, how much have they stolen of intellectual property of the actual design? Because if you open up a Rolex, sometimes the motor, the engine, or whatever, the movement inside is not identical to the real Rolex. So the question then is, they put that in, and now, yes, it looks like a Rolex, but it's not inside. So there are a few things different. For example, some of the lettering, the way that second hand moves is slightly different. The point between intellectual property theft and not is fine. On the other hand, if you ask me, I think it's damn stupid to buy anything that is fake, because it takes away your inside feeling of, hey, I have the real thing. It's almost like getting a beautiful girl who has not the same intellectual level that you want, but on the outside, it's what you dream about.
That's right. Well, we're treading into dangerous territory with the watches and the women. So I'm going to make a right turn here. I know for a while you were teaching anti-pickpocket techniques on stage to in Vegas to travelers. We'll link to some of your stuff in the show notes. And I know you even now, or at least maybe pre-COVID, were training law enforcement and intelligence agencies. I know you can't say a lot about that. Right.
I can go a small amount into it, but not. But I mean, let's separate the two. Teaching law enforcement, that I can certainly talk about, because, of course, the thing is, if you are a regular police officer and you specialize in you know, being out in the street and watching these guys on trains in New York or tube stations or whatever, metro, for example, you know, you have a superficial knowledge, or over the years you see how they operate, but you're not necessarily getting into the headspace. You don't know exactly how they wake up into the morning and who they call up and how they use the diversion and where they sell it and how they manipulate the credit card. So in my case, my strength is that I have spent 20, 30 years befriending or getting very, very close into how they work. And I have been able to film them. Now, a police officer even if he works undercover, is not going to be able to day after day be out with a small camera and be half a yard away from the hands entering into the handbag and stealing and the technique of it all. He may know that once he grabs the guy and put the hand behind and takes him over and do the report and so on, his philosophy is, I am law enforcement, I am honest, you are a criminal, you are whatever, dirt. So when he talks to the guy, his lingo and his face reaction and his mannerism is going to be that the thief is very reluctant to talk back
Sure.
to the police officer. Unless if the police officer says, look, you're looking at 6 years here, you've been arrested before, and if you give me up so-and-so, I'm going to make sure that the judge understands and you're going to get a lower sentence. So it's not impossible to have communication, but I sit on information and videos that I can teach the police precisely how to catch them, see them early. What is the police interested in? They don't want to catch them when they hear a woman screaming, hey, you took my wallet.
Right.
That's too late.
Too late, yeah.
You want to be behind the guy when he's already scanning and glancing. So how do you tell if you take 3 openings on the doors of a metro and around each are 30 people who are trying to shove in at 5 o'clock? Or like in Barcelona or in Paris and London, where you have hordes of people. How do you know who to track behind so that when it happens, you can be there and grab his hand?
Right, you're seeing what they look like beforehand. You can see
before. That is much more important than anything of this, seeing what 2 fingers are precisely nipping the leather and gradually moving it out so that the victim doesn't feel it. Or how do they know that that particular phone is much more valuable and breaking into versus that phone? And what is the market value of that iPhone versus that whatever? So, the thieves know these things because they were kind of brought up with it. That's all they live. That's their world. So for me, the idea is teach law enforcement how to observe them early, not during the actual incident itself. As far as intelligence community, of course, there are certain things, whether it is SEAL units or other units that are behaving with certain skill sets, and they may be, you may have a sharpshooter, a hacker, whatever qualification they have inside the unit of 10 guys, 11 or 12 guys. They may not necessarily be superb at certain psychological skills, or if they're sent down to Nairobi or Lusaka or Hong Kong in order to protect someone or to accomplish something with the opponent. An opponent would be, for example, an undercover Russian guy. Well, in order to invade the Russian guy, he has been taught how to catch or how to see who is an American intelligence guy. So they both are taught at home manners of the type of clothes, how they tilt their heads, how far, how long time they stare here, how serious are they smiling, who they see. There's a million small things that the criminals are very good at learning, which I know. And so I can, to some extent, so I am not revealing something here that if the other side, my opponents, if they're listening to this, they're not going to say, he told me gold here. Mm-hmm. Are you with me so far?
I get it. I know we can't talk about a lot of that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people that come on and we have intelligence agents or former...
You have to go so far.
Yeah, it's all sort of like, if you already know it, you know what he's talking about. But if you don't already know it, you can't put it together. That's all right. I understand that. It's important to preserve tradecraft, as they say.
And ultimately, it's a little bit of a chess game. I move a piece, they move a piece, I move a piece, they move a piece. It never is stagnant. It's continuously changing because the power of balance in Europe is changing continuously. You know, Estonia, a certain group there are going to feel more this way. Ukraine right now, you know, one fifth of the population is leaning towards one side. All of this is constantly changing, including our own power, meaning United States. How much money do we have to hire 20 guys to follow just one single guy without him noticing it on the streets of Paris? It's a question of money, it's a question of will, and what is the final goal, and are the two political parties in agreement what that final goal is?
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a cluster. I do want to get back to pickpocketing because you mentioned what these people look like. You know, what are you looking for if you're training law enforcement, or even if it's just you out on a hobby run? When you say, okay, I'm not looking for the two fingers in the wallet or in the bag, get in the wallet. That's too late. What are you looking for? What are the signs that these people have? Because obviously you're looking for them being extra aware of their environment. What else?
So you have to understand that there are many, many levels of pickpockets. At the cheapest part, and anyone can recognize that, would be some poor female girls, 14, 15, 16 years old, from Bulgaria, Romania. They've been lumped together in a group, and some criminal gang have gone into the small farmlands in Bulgaria and said, "Can I rent your girl for 2 years?"
Wow.
And they lumped them together. They trained them to be pickpocket. They send them in a Volkswagen bus to Paris. And now you have 60 girls controlled by 5 different syndicates. And every day they have to go out between this hour and that hour to steal. And they dress in a certain way. They have a scarf, and they look fairly elegant. It's not like 20 years ago where you could instantly recognize them because they look trashy and they always had long skirts and so on. But now they go a little overboard. There's a tad too much makeup, a tad too much color, and so they stand out just a fraction. How they behave on a platform, or let's say around the Louvre or a Colosseum in Rome or whatever, they are not going to be quite looking at the building and taking up a phone and saying, "Honey, stand over there, I'll take a picture." They're going to be kind of glancing a little like this at the various handbags, analyzing, can I get in there or not? Is that a good victim to go for? Is that person 55 or older and moving a little slow? Is that particular person in a small group of 3 and I can invade them in somehow? So depending on whether we are above ground or below ground, meaning at the bus terminal or in a metro station, those girls are going to behave in a certain way. The police usually can detect them without my help. The next level up, guys who are between 19 and 35 who come from poor area, they could have been shipped in from Chile or Peru because they were very good in their home countries, and they were sent over to Paris to work and Barcelona. Sometimes they are there hoping to find another job. Then the employment scenario went down, and now in the bars and whatever, some of the good pickpockets, when they want to find a partner, they go to train stations and they see who is hanging, and they watch people and they say to themselves, that guy moves too slow. Look at how he's moving from A to B. He's not going to be good for me as a partner. But look at that guy. He has a certain sprint, a certain mannerism. I'm going to approach him. And then they walk up and say, here, how would you like to work with me to become a partner? And they train them. So teams of 3 means that you have one who can distract a little bit, another one who slows or just slows it down. The thieves picks it, but pickpocket never holds. So he passes it on to a partner. So if the police catches him 2 seconds after, he's clean. There's nothing on him.
So he hands off the wallet or the watch or whatever.
Hands it off.
Yeah.
That particular type of little dream are harder for the police to catch. So in my particular case, I look at how serious are they? How often do they smile? How often do they seem to have a purpose forward to meet their 5 o'clock train? There is a lot of small telltale signs in people in general if you have a purpose or if you are a tourist. smiling, ignorant to everything, dressing a bit silly, over the top, the wrong shoes for the area, and on and on. So you stand out as far as a tourist. That means now I'm describing a typical victim
Sure.
here. But for the police, one of the things they want to do is they want to look at the eyes, because a thief needs to glance all the time at potential victims. And he cannot afford to glance up and check out cameras. Because if you have cameras everywhere in the train station, the guys who sit and monitor are going to see, look at that guy. He's glancing at the camera, and he calls on his phone to the undercover cop. Track him, you're going to follow him a little bit. And if he turns around a tad, some criminals just cannot avoid it, stupid as it may seem, to see if they're being tracked. And so every often they do a little small glance just to see, or they look into the glass in the mirror to see if someone is tracking them behind. A great undercover cop will behave with the bag in his hand and move fast and pass the thief and have a second one, so it shifts all the time, because you don't want to be able to have the thief identify that you are undercover. The very, very good guys are going to work in hotel lobbies or in, for example, a train station where you have the restaurant. They're going to isolate people who are higher up on the scale of victim, potentially more money to grab.
What kind of hotel lets somebody hang around in the lobby for a year? Right? Like, they can't work that same spot over and over and over unless they're in on it.
Absolutely true. So, you have a variety of hotel theft. You have what we call the breakfast thieves. And they will come in to hotels that specialize in fairly large group of tourists. For example, cruise passengers in Barcelona are going to be at a certain range price-wise of hotels. And suddenly you're going to have 60 ignorant tourists. You're not going to have Swiss tourists who's been told on television, watch out for your bag all the time, watch out for your bag all the time. You're going to have people who are jolly and happy and go up and take a little more cereal and another glass of juice or more, apple or whatever it may be. And so they leave the bag behind. So the thieves coming in pretending to be guests there. And they are trying to avoid having the waiters saying, what room are you staying in? Or what can I, do you want coffee or whatever? They don't want to have eye contact with that. So it looks, they're coming in as if they were looking for someone that they're glancing for. They analyze where, and then they move up shielding, so that when that victim moves up to get more, now the guy who's going to steal comes over with a jacket draped over, or he has a hook that slides out from his arm here. It could be something as simple as one of those stands that expands for your iPhone. Are you familiar with what I'm talking
like a
about?
selfie
that
stick?
You hold up. Yeah, exactly. At the end of the selfie stick there. So what they do, you can say that it works like a hook. So if the police catch him, he's not having a professional tool on him. He's having a selfie stick. It was maybe under the jacket, whatever. So now if the bag is down on the floor, the thief comes up, has the jacket hanging over his arm. He lets the stick go down, lifts it up under the jacket, and moves away. And make sure that the victim, there is someone else blocking the visual view back.
Right, so there's somebody waiting behind them for the buffet while I'm waiting behind the guy getting oatmeal, but my partner's stealing his suitcase or his laptop or his phone.
Yeah. So that's one type of hotel. Another type of hotel will be the fine restaurant or the lobby. The lobby is especially when people are checking in or checking out. So, for example, in Las Vegas, checking out time is when security is really on the ball, because suddenly everyone is there with bags while they are standing there around. Husband is up paying, and she's standing with two bags, and on top of one of them is her handbag with either a wallet and credit cards and phones or whatever. So if you can go in there and invade, or especially foreign tourists, where, for example, they sit down in the lounge chairs that are surrounding where you make your payment. So the wife may be sitting there with two bags, and the guy comes up and again slides it out or puts his arm, the jacket over. So hotel lobbies is a typical area.
That we can include some of your public videos in the show notes for people who are trying to visualize this, because you've got some stuff on YouTube that we have, and we can show just how people think I would. What's funny? People think this will never work on me. I would definitely notice somebody coming up and stealing my bag, but not really. Though.
That's what the funniest thing with that is. I have so many police officers, friends, who are saying, "That's all very cool, Bob, but it's never going to happen to me. Not a chance in hell that can happen to me." And then 2 years later, they say, I can't understand how this happened. I was on that subway from the airport in, and it was crowded. And for a second, I did this and whatever, and it happened. So it's very hard when you travel to continue 24 hours, to be on super guard. And further on, you destroy the fun. If you're going to sort of say, "Oh my God, what happens around the corner here all the time?" that takes away a little bit of the fun part of it.
Definitely.
Now, I am not subscribing here. I'm not saying that you should taking a wallet with $50 and go to Italy and say, "I rather like to go to Italy and see all of the famous things, all the way from the south, from Chile up to Rome and so on. And I wouldn't mind to lose $50. I'm not inducing you to do it, but don't be so concerned that it becomes animal about it.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think this is in our last interview, you said that pickpockets look for people with really nice shoes because they know that they have money in their wallet. Do you still hold to that one?
Well, that is actually that's a quote from a very famous pickpocket that I befriended in Naples. And what's interesting there is some of those guys asked me to come every Christmas and spend time with them and stay in their houses.
Oh, wow.
Weird. I mean, I haven't. At one point, we went there over New Year, and I'm going to the bathroom, and it's all gold faucets. And this is a street pickpocket. He's very good, dresses well, but yet he's a street pickpocket. I'm saying, I'm coming back out from the bathroom. I said, "What is this gold faucet? What the hell?" Okay. He said, "No, you don't understand, Bob. I'm only staying here. The boss, the real guy, he's in prison, and he has a sentence of 6 years, and I'm just making sure nothing happens to his house." So he was told to live there. So it wasn't his house. But the big guy, the big mafioso guys there, they make serious money, but from a lot of other human trafficking, drugs, whatever.
Yeah.
But going back to the shoes, yes, and a very. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, because I don't think you're going to be able to dispute me quite the way you think first you could. A good shoe that is almost handmade, but half handmade, let's say part of it. And there are very wealthy lawyers and bankers and people who absolutely adore Italian shoes, including the British handmade one. They start at around 1,400 a pair and up.
Wow.
A guy who's wearing that, you can be damn sure, 95% sure, that there's a lot of things to take from that guy who is worthwhile. Is it conceivable that it's some fashion writer who was given the shoes in order to write about it, and he has no more in the bank account than you have? Well, that's conceivable, but I'm
playing
just
the
giving
odds.
you
You can play the odds on that one.
I'm painting it.
Yeah.
Picture for you.
Yeah, that makes it. Look, I've been given a lot of nice things to review, but I know that they sell more than they give away, or it would be a bad business. So I'm not too worried. If I were a thief, I wouldn't be thinking, "Ooh, maybe that schmuck looks like he got him for free."
So the point here that we're trying to make here is, yes, there is a lot of things about people dress mode and what fashion you follow and how comfortable you are in it, or whether you're just trying to show off and you suddenly got the bonus and you go out and spending $2,000 at Saks, and then you go to Paris and you feel like you're big shot. But the big picture you can't fool.
So you spent a long time pretending to be a bumbling tourist, allowing the thieves to steal, catching them on camera, and then what? Are you analyzing their techniques and trying to learn them yourself as well?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of ways here. First of all, if I work intimately, like I did some years ago with certain law enforcement agencies, I would buy used clothes, secondhand clothes. For example, in Moscow or St. Petersburg, so I looked shabbier than the tourist or the local population. I didn't want to stand out, because if I'm going to be able to trail or follow behind and be nearby and so on, I didn't want to look like an American tourist, even although I'm tall and all of that, so it's hard to disguise. But otherwise, when I want to film an actual theft, I behave exactly like an English or American tourist who is completely unaware of anything that's happening around. And that means my body language, and I'll take up the wallet and I buy the tickets, and then I put it down, and I even let them almost see the wallet if someone stands here when I'm buying the ticket, and then putting it back in here. And I will have fake or old credit cards, so when it does go, I'm not going to be missing something. So yes, I do put my up, and then Bambi, my wife, films, or we do it the other way around. But yes, we are definitely becoming the victim. And that's another thing, of course, that it's very difficult for the police officer to do, which is that I have an extra, shall we say, ability to capture this. However, today my library of incident is so large that whenever something really good happens in Europe, I get a phone call 2 hours later, and some guy in Zurich or London saying, police officer saying, "Hey, Bob, we have this. Can I send it over? Could you see if in the background, do you recognize that girl? Does it mean anything to you?" So I will analyze, and I sit on stuff that I could never use. I couldn't show you. I couldn't, give it out to, even if 60 Minutes said, "Bob, we want to do a profile on you." Not going to happen.
Because it's law enforcement. It's evidence footage. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Are pickpockets in all countries different, right? Like, do you have a difference in Romanian pickpocket, Spanish pickpocket, French pickpocket, New York pickpocket? It seems like there's got to be some almost like cultural differences between how they execute this.
Absolutely. And, sometimes it's very hard not to be fond of them, meaning to befriend. There are some, especially if they have a little bit of what we call itinerant traveler. Now in England, they call them nomads. 20 years ago, we called them gypsies. That's not politically correct anymore. You can't use that label because there's stigma attached to it. But yet you have people who are very unfortunate in a couple of countries, Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, and so forth, where you had a large percentage of them living. And after the Second World War, they were not given school education like the rest of society, shunted down, less quality and whatever. So it produced, they got less chance to do something really well in life later on. So they had parents who almost pushed them into this sort of culture. They are very emotional, very warm. They know they're doing something bad, but when you talk to them, they will say, I saw the bag was over there, or that person had on bad. I am poor. I need that $200 that sits there just as much as he does. So why don't I have the right? It's very hard for them to wrap themselves around who is mine, what is mine, and what's yours. So of course, it's hard for me when I establish friendship. I have to not fool them, meaning I don't want to tell them, look, if you befriend me, I promise you will never serve any time in jail. I want to be somewhat open.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand that it's hard for me to think They don't know the difference between right and wrong, or they can't help themselves. I mean,
No. But you asked the question you asked me really was what's the difference between different continents and different thieves.
Right.
I brought this up as a foundation to say there are some cultures where it isn't as, shall we say, horrible that you're doing this as it is in where I've come from. Let's say Finland and Norway. You steal that package of cigarette. My God, you took that from me. What the hell do you mean? Well, if you do that in, let's say, in Ankara or in Johannesburg, it's not a big deal. Well, they were sitting there. I didn't think you meant. I thought they. So people from different parts of the world are going to behave different. So the skill set, if you take thieves, for example, in Chile, they are very fast and quick and smooth. They're damn impossible to catch. If you catch them, you can hardly get them to talk because they're controlled by syndicates, so they will hurt their parents. A guy in St. Petersburg, a good thief, for example, not today, but some years ago when the police were underpaid, there were a couple of gangs that were allowed to work for about an hour around certain famous buildings where you have banks and so forth. So because of that, for about 60 minutes, they could steal without the threat of being caught. They developed a skill set that, bar none, were just simply unbelievably good. And if you take the guys down in Naples, they are absolutely sensational because it's been in their culture for so long. Not all of Naples. I mean, don't misunderstand me here. But yes, different race, body language, what they were brought up with, food, how their parents told them certain things, all of that plays into where they are today on the skill set and the ladder. And you can say that they behave quite different. So if I analyze how they move up and how they remove a wallet, the guy from Italy, the guy from Romania, or the guy from Caracas, they're going to behave different.
Who are the best in your opinion?
I asked that question to pickpockets. I said, who do you really respect? Who do you admire? What do you think is the guy? Because I want to meet the guy who is really fantastic. And they say to me, Bob, you got this all wrong. There is no such thing as the best. The guy who over a period of time walks away with more money than the other guy, he is the best. Not the fact that he could slowly, trajectory-wise, move it out and step on the foot with the left foot, his foot on the victim's foot, and the person vicked over. Or like in Russia, they can cross into a person sometimes and flap the inside jacket of the victim so it folds over and lift the wallet in a stroke, just in a slow motion, like this. No one stands still. Unbelievable. But if there's very little money, he's not the best. So there are two ways to ask this. One, who has certain techniques that are simply fantastic, or who is very smart at figuring out how to make whatever is in the wallet go further. And then you get into credit card fraud, identity theft, and how you observe before the 4 PIN numbers that you used in a bank or when you bought the ticket, and remember the color of the credit card. But let's assume there are 9 credit cards in your wallet. And they observe the 4 numbers. They have 2 people on either side as you press in. So the one on the left sees the 2 number here. They don't even have to see that it says 1, 2, and 3. They just see that you hit the top row, the second row, the third row. So they know, they can figure out exactly what you press. So now they have the combined. Now they have to remember the color of that credit card. Now they have to tag on to that person. And half an hour after they leave the bus or the train, they are in an elevator up in the hotel, and then they got jostled with the bags and they lift the wallet. Now they can do identity theft. There is not a good pickpocket team in Europe today who are not getting less than 2,000 from their wallet.
Oh, because they're tracking me when I eat breakfast, and then I pay, and then they're following me, and then they go and they max out my card.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
Nobody is good today. Who wants to have just 60 euros or $25? It's peanuts. The phone, on the other hand, selling the whole phone. Now that's a different story.
So this could be big money. I mean, if you get 1 or 2 people a day, and then you get a phone or two a day, you're making doctor lawyer money.
Yes, correct. That is if you belong to the upper echelon. That's why it's so difficult for me to get these people to stop and say, hey, look here, don't you think you should shift over now? You're 55 years old. Come on, you have a family, you have kids in school, blah, blah, blah. Let me help you to find a regular job. You can have a car mechanic or whatever. And first they said, yeah, I want to. But actually get them to make that leap over. Only
Right.
COVID has helped me.
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, you're saying, look, it's a better way to live. You'll make 15% of what you make now, but it's better for you. How is it better? I have a boss yelling at me. I have to get up early every day. He's telling me I'm fired with no warning, or I can make 5 times as much money and get up whenever I want and eat at fancy restaurants and stay at the Ritz-Carlton.
Now we're suddenly talking about a moral aspect that applies all over. Because what about the people who, the little firm who import absolutely, they know, copyrighted infringed stuff from China and sells it without saying, for example, or the ones who are on the dark internet selling just code or credit card numbers. There's not so much crime today that isn't simply just lifting a wallet that are on the fringes. And that moral compass and figuring out right and wrong. I mean, that is even a bigger issue. People are starting to forget about where this right and wrong is.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a whole separate show, probably.
You should be able to hire guys who are really good at that part, and then then you get into politics. Pickpocketing is part of politics also. And the reason why is because in Europe, for example, you have different countries that have different measure of sentences or how you apprehend them. And, all of that is coming into play. In America, pickpocketing is less today. Let's be realistic here. Compared with some years ago, you do not have as many guys who are really good pickpockets. As we had in the past. We have teams who are coming in from South America at certain conventions, especially now after COVID when it starts to open up again. But what we do have, and I'm not certain whether you want to call them pickpockets or not, big clubs with a lot of, dance and disco type style, their phones are stolen. So a good pickpocket there, sometimes when you catch them, they have expandable clothes on them.
Expandable clothes?
Expandable under their pants. And you will find 60 phones on them shoved down into different, and they're there for 2 hours and they take that one and that one because everyone is, dancing and having a good time. And yep. So that
Wow.
is that's a big scene. And the same thing outdoor theaters where there's some famous pop group or whatever. You can imagine just from the behavior. So that scene has not diminished. If anything, it has increased and become bigger.
That's 60 phones. I mean, now you're talking like 5-figure.
Well, you got to remember that not every phone. Am I exaggerating here? Well, I just happened to mention one that happened to have that many. But let's assume that they take 25 and then leave the establishment. Well, only half of those phones are going to be of value on the secondary market. They were blocked and stopped up, so you can only sell them for the parts. So it depends on what is the state of that phone right there? How good when they sell it on and ship them. Sometimes they shipped in lots of 20 to different other parts of the world where they are abused.
Yeah. Oh man, the cell phone market is crazy. My family, my wife's family, they work in that business, and they'll say something like, "Oh, this month was bad. We paid $2 million for a batch of phones, and either they never arrived, or half of them arrived, or they arrived and they weren't usable, or they arrived and they were the company said these are all stolen, and then they sell them to Africa, and it's just a crazy black market for these things."
Exactly. And is it an intriguing market? How they all go about it? Obviously, I know. During my career, some good hackers who have been very good. And when they reveal to me, and I'm talking about white hat hacker, even although they started off as black hat, but that to me is maybe even more fascinating than what we're talking about right here, because the intelligence community and everyone, big corporation, they all want hire the best hacker community, because the threat, whether it is from Russia, from China, and wherever, whatever country, is a lot bigger than some tanks with 16 guys are walking on the border of Ukraine. So the threat here in terms of hacking is incredible.
Yeah, of course. No, cyber warfare is so interesting, and I've done a couple shows about that as well. How are thieves communicating during the you call it the lift, right? Where they take the item. There's the blocker who distracts. The guy who steals is called the cannon, right? According to my research, I don't know how'd they name that.
Well, there's a lot in, we have a book and we have a whole chapter just on the lingo. It's called Travel Advisory. Anyhow, in it there we have all of those various slang terms that they're using. And some years ago they did use them very intimately, and each country have their own terms for these terms. But the lingo. So what a good pickpocket will say, the guy who's leading it, he is looking for partners who instantly senses and knows where he should be in relationship to the pickpocket. So, you should, if you're there just to block, you're going to have a fifth sense to looking at the victim, where the eyes are, friends of partner who are in between. How can I, in a natural way, so I don't draw attention too much, so it looks like I'm unnatural, so I'm bumbling in and doing something forceful. How can you be in a semi-smiley, kind way, reaching for or taking up the newspaper and just shielding a look, or a map, a fake map, very, very common.
Yeah.
Flowers are common, and shawl. The most common thing is a shawl. Am I saying it right?
Shawl? Yeah, like a big scarf.
So they have a beautiful shawl, the female, and she will take it and she will fiddle with it for a second. It'll just flip out as if she's changing it. Well, in that particular little thing there, boom, she just shielded from outside or from the camera what the hand of the thief was doing. Or she may even be good enough, if she's working alone at that moment, to do it herself.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of pickpocket experiences. One, I was walking in Jerusalem, and it was like a massive crowd in the those narrow streets, and somebody fell into me, and I reached it, and I felt the hand in my pocket, and I turned around, and there was somebody in robes, like long robes, and they were supposed to. They were pretending they were an old lady, but I knew it wasn't because the hand was so strong. It was a strong hand, and it was like it just didn't make sense. Like there's no chance that this old lady who's hunchback, is that strong. So I grabbed and I squeezed in through my own pocket. I squeezed, and she pulled her hand out, and then she just sort of like cut through the crowd all the way towards the wall and went away. And she ended up getting like not my wallet, but some other garbage thing that I had in there that had rubber bands around it. I don't even remember what it was, but it was junk. And then more recently, I think probably after our first interview, I saw a guy. We were in Switzerland. I was with my family. My dad likes to walk like 20 feet ahead of us because he's not paying attention. And I saw this guy leaning up against the wall, smoking, leather jacket. He looked like he'd been awake for about 3 days with no sleep, and it's like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and he was dressed for the evening, which meant he'd probably been out all night. And he saw my dad, locked onto my dad. My dad has a giant, map and a bunch of crap sticking out of his back pocket. My dad's 77 years old, whatever. And he's walking, and I notice him because he doesn't realize we're together. Because, again, my dad walks like 10, 15 feet ahead of us. And I said, Mom, that guy's a pickpocket. And my mom said, what are you talking about? The guy almost burned you with a cigarette. He's not paying attention. He's a pickpocket, and he's going after Dad. And I walked up to the guy, and I said, excuse me, do you know how we get to... And he was like looking at me, looking at my dad, and he tried to ignore me. And I said, excuse me, do you know how to get to such and such, whatever? And he just looked at my dad, and he went, he said to himself, screw it, because my dad was too far away. And I said, Dad, let's get directions. And the guy just walked away. He pretended like he didn't understand me, but I knew he was going for my dad.
What you should have said is, By any chance, do you know Bob Arno?
Yeah, I will. Next time I'll do that. I'll say, do you know Bob Arno? Because, yeah, I didn't want to get stabbed, but I just did the first thing I could think of. These guys, I mean, some of the guys look like...
No, there's no question of that.
Yeah.
There is a percentage of violence, and we didn't touch on that before. I do want to give, before we get too deep in here, on a couple of advice, a couple of points on what we should do so it doesn't happen to you. But yes, the percentage of violence, I would say in today's world, where they are prepared to use a knife, because I don't want to sort of poop on one country more than another. But there are certain areas that if you try and arrest a pickpocket and they have served time, either they themselves for use a knife or someone in the group. And especially because they know when they're back. Well, I can say this because I don't think it's politically incorrect. In India, for example, the Indian population look down upon pickpocketing tremendously, while as in Latin America, they don't. They say, hey, they're poor, we understand where you're coming from. If they catch an Indian pickpocket, there are incidents within the last 6 months where they actually killed the pickpocket.
Oh, wow.
Now, it wasn't that they were seeking to see the end of life, but they pummeled him with stones and sticks and whatever, to the point where the guy just simply died. So the gap there is enormous. Now, I'm not saying that pickpockets in India are using knives if you're there as a tourist. On the contrary, the chance of you being pickpocketed in India is very small, unless you're so stupid that you want to go on those trains that are known, for having unbelievable crowded scene. If you do that, well, then you're almost asking for it. But let me go back to a couple of points here. The first thing, if you're traveling to a new area that you haven't read about, and I would suggest strongly that you first go and read a little bit about your destination. There are State Department and other, they give you those easy hints of what the percentage is. Because if you're going to go up in Norway to Stavanger, you're not going to get pickpocketed. Well, nothing is impossible. Everything can happen. But there are some areas where we simply... culture and the way for the thief to coming in and survive there are so slim that he's not going to make that as a destination. So reading up in advance is smart. When you arrive into the destination, ask the front desk, how careful do I need to be daytime with my wallet? What area should I avoid? And in the night, should I take a taxi for that restaurant or can I walk back home? Because you take a place like Barcelona, it's night and day at 11 o'clock in the day and 11 o'clock in the evening. Some of those very fashionable, for example, Born area, there are lots of criminal activity there, whether it is drugs or simple mugging. Mugging is just as prevalent as pickpocket, or maybe even more so. You get shoved into the ground and they grab it, or they show you the knife and say, give me the wallet. It means don't mess with me, pass it over. So having that information, you don't necessarily always get in a tourist brochure, but getting it from the front desk is really, really smart. Getting a little bit of pre-information. Have what I would call give up money. So if you're going into a territory where you hear, let's say you are on a safari down in South Africa, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just South Africa, it could be any of the countries around, whether it is Mozambique or Lusaka or whatever. If you're going on a small safari or extensive one, and then you don't have to worry because the travel organizer is making sure that your car isn't going to be stopped and carjacked and whatever. But when you're privately, a few days before and a few days after, have give up money. And that means money that you can, when they said, hold you up against the wall, when they say, mother F, give me your wallet, you pull up your wallet that you prepared, and you have $30 or $20 that you're prepared to give the guy. So you're coming prepared to lose this in case of a confrontation. As far as pickpocketing, 3 credit cards, American Express and MasterCard, for example, whatever the third one is, doesn't really matter. Lock the third card into your safe in the hotel. As long as you're young enough to remember,
The
damn it,
code.
that you have a wallet there with a credit card, right? And if you lose your wallet, now you have the third card until you can go and report an embassy and get the report and so forth. Have a copy of your passport and your credit card and all of the information on a website where you have access to, and where you can drag it out. In case of something goes bad, you can drag it out. You go to the embassy and you say, here's a digital copy of my thing. Instantly, within 24 hours, you have a new one versus having to wait a long time. As to how you dress, I would say that any pocket that is fairly loose, you take a guy who is 50 years old and he's not wearing jeans. The front pockets, where they are slanted, slightly loose, is a piece of cake. There isn't a pickpocket who's worth his gold or whatever who couldn't get in there and lift it. It's easier than a hip pocket, because the hip pocket is slightly more contracting around it. If you are going on subways, stay away from the doors. Because that's where they're going to hang. Because once they got something, they want to get off. So get in a tad and maybe have a hand over the wallet while you are entering that really crowded scene. As long as you are in balance to holding on to poles and other things. But while you're going in, and then analyze around, what is there that is nearby me? How crowded? Is it like sardines? Well, then you have to be careful. Female handbag, have your arm squeezed around it, the opening all the time. If it's one of those handbags that is open at the top without the zipper and you just shove things down and not, realize that if you have your phone in there and it's at the top, piece of cake, have it maybe under clothes or a shawl, whatever you have in that bag at the bottom. When you're in a big market, let's say in Madrid, you were in one of those food markets and you're having a lunch there and you're leaning over to pick something up. And whenever your arms are out like this, whether it's a hotel lobby, that's when you're out here, you're not sensing what's going on.
When your arms are out, yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense. There's a lot of tips and things like that in some of the videos that I watch, and I'm finding it fascinating. And I've talked about this before with you long time ago. You made that little, I guess it's a documentary where you actually go to Naples to crack open the den of the best pickpockets and thieves. Tell me about this. Tell me about Angelo and all these guys. These guys are crazy.
It's called Pickpocket King. And it was made by National Geographic. It took maybe the production company took them 3 years to get all of the things together, because as you know, when you raise money to make a film or a documentary, the guys who are putting up the money, they want to know, what is the journey? What is the end result? Well, when you go in and do a film on pickpocketing, it's very hard to know exactly where is going to be the end of the film. I can't promise you that I'm going to meet the best guy. But the producer and the director said, what is your dream, Bob? And my dream was meet the best pickpocket in Europe, maybe in the world, and have dinner with him and his team and see if he is prepared to spill his guts. When I said that to the guy, to the director and the producer team, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. How do we know that? We raised the money. How do we know that you're going to really meet them? So what they did is they went behind my back. First of all, they said, what city are we going to do it in Paris, in Rome, whatever? I said, I think Naples is the best one because it's almost like a national sport to do pickpocketing. Yeah. It's... you do, the people say, you do pickpocket? Oh, okay, nobody is thinking twice about it, right? So we know there's a fair amount, and it's very concentrated on certain areas. Not like in Paris, where it's everywhere, you could spread it out and different facets of pickpocketing here and there. But in Naples, it's tight. So I said, Naples. So then what they did to make sure that they had a film, they went to the police and said, could you give us some old pickpockets who has been arrested? And can you guarantee that they will talk to Bob Arno? And they paid to find these people. That doesn't make for a great film to have guys who are now a baker or food or designer, but he used to be 15 years ago
Right.
a good pickpocket. Maybe it's part interesting, but it's not what the film is about. So when they had that secure, they came back and said, Bob, they didn't tell me. You can go ahead, we'll do the film with you. And one of the things that we wanted to do also was to put two teams together to compete, where I was in one and the other team, who could steal the most, but of course have everything returned. The idea is that the public who is watching it should see how damn easy it can be. The moral aspect was that I didn't want to come across so that the viewers are saying, there's no question about it. Bob Arno was a real street thief before, and now he went straight. So it was very hard for me to prove that in the film. But in any case, we went there, and they had big cameras. And so when I was in the airport, they met me and they had a big camera and said, Bob, what's going to happen here? And everyone around know that was a film team. I said, in this time when it was made, Hero had come on the market. That's a small little
Oh, the
digital
GoPro,
camera.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right. So in any case, I said, forget about all these big ones. I know that the rule is you must have certain minutes of footage with a big camera. Otherwise, you're not allowed to, even today, Netflix and all of them, whatever you do, the Red camera and some of those, you got to have footage made on the big or they won't buy it. Strange. So, but for me, it was a problem. Can't walk around with big cameras. So, Bambi and I, my wife, we were used with filming very, very small cameras inside our bags and fanny packs and whatever. So, in any case, I said, get rid of that until we have we caught some guys. So we went out, couldn't see anything. Nothing happened. I'm standing inside the tram, and suddenly, and I've been on there for about 20 minutes, and my team is about 20 feet down, maybe 25 feet down, with some small cameras. So three guys are coming through the middle door of the bus as it's open up, and I'm seeing them glancing left and glancing right. They're standing straight, but their eyes are doing this. And there's no smile. They're really looking, intensely looking. I said, these are thieves. But that doesn't mean they're going to go to me and steal from me, right? So I am talking to my wife, Bambi, and I'm really cheery, as if I haven't the faintest idea that these guys are thieves. Bingo. It's like, do you remember that old Popeye film where the eyes used to pop out?
Oh, yeah, sure. Boing, yeah. Uh-huh.
Whatever. Okay. That's the reaction on these guys. So they're coming up. And it's fairly loose around me. There's not too many people. So they have to create their own little crowd. So they are 4 in this team. So 2 people who are not doing the stealing are kind of angling up and leaning against, very, very nearby. And then they're coming up and they're stealing. I don't feel a thing. I know it's happening, but I don't feel the actual extraction. So I don't get the finger. But one of my team members who stands a little far, is actually getting the lift, even although it's crowded around. It's not super clear, but you see it. So now we're getting off, and now I brush. I say, the wallet is gone. So now I know they have it. Now I can't start talk to them on the bus because they're going to say, what, me? Or they drop it on the floor. So we have no film. So I want them to leave the bus without them thinking that I know.
Right.
So they leave out and they watch me. And just as the door is about to close, I moved out and kind of moved it out. But they're already out, so they can't get back up. And then I go back up and I smile like hell. And I hold up my phone and I say, I'm from Las Vegas. And you see this huge face. And I'm holding my phone. I said, I do the same. Je fais la même que vous. And I'm starting a video of a Las Vegas thing where I'm stealing. And they're looking and suddenly they realize I'm a pickpocket, but on stage.
Right.
And as I'm holding up, I said, you hold it. And as he's grabbing my phone to hold it, to look at it, I take his watch. I steal his watch.
Well,
Now, wait a minute. My guys who is going to film, they are much further away. They are not getting this footage of me stealing it. But Bambi, my wife, knows what is happening. So her handbag it's a small handbag with one of those small cameras inside. And there's a glass buckle over it where the lens is seeing through. So she is filming it as I'm stealing the watch. Sees it goes away. And a minute later, his reaction, and he goes, wow! And he is super excited that I stole his watch. But my wife held her handbag opposite, which she didn't realize. But it didn't matter because in tech, in editing, you could reverse it.
sure.
But when you play it first, it's upside down. So now we start talking. Now, I don't speak enough Italian. So we have planted on the ground here, rather, one of my team member. I tell him, whenever we have this happen, step aside. So he sits on the ground about 20 feet away from where I'm standing with this cluster saying, I'm from Las Vegas and a showman. And they talk to my wife. And where are you from? From America, from Las Vegas. Oh, yeah. So they're absolutely convinced that I'm a stage pickpocket. Now, I take a regular guy who walks by and I stop him and I say, do you speak a little English? Can you help me translate? He said, no. I knew that because I wanted the thieves to think that I needed someone translate and anyone would do. So I say to one of the pickpockets, what about that guy? Can we get him? Ask him. So the pickpocket said, do you speak a little English? And he's sitting on the ground. He's our translator. He said, yeah, why? Come here. So he's my guy. And he comes in, and now they say, let's go and have coffee together. They are saying. So we start the conversation. And from there on, we build over 2 weeks closer and closer and closer relationship. But the guy I really want to meet is not this guy. He's not the best one. I know who is the best guy. So on the 3rd week in Naples, on a tram, I see my guy working. And now I approach him. And I say, do you remember me from 10 years ago? We met here, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks at my wife. Oh, yeah. And then he agrees to go over and have a little coffee. And then we get him to meet up for this dinner. So we get 20 of the best pickpockets in Naples to come and have dinner together.
They didn't think it was a police operation or something like that?
No, wait. That's a good question. So one of these guys will not permit any camera work.
Yeah, okay.
All the time. He said, if you're on camera, you have to face it up. So the others, the one who were that I had the first encounter, who took my wallet, is wearing an ankle bracelet, police thing, and he is not allowed to be out from 9 to 5 anywhere in the center of Naples.
Wow.
And he knows that he stole from me. He doesn't know that we have caught him on camera. All he knows, he stole and he shouldn't be there.
Right, yeah.
So we're saying to him, what do you think here that if we do a thing where we do a little documentary and at the end, so he doesn't think that I have footage of him stealing. All he knows is he's met me. And we're saying, would you do a little telling the public how not to be a victim? Maybe that could help you with judges and lawyers and so forth.
Right, yeah, be the good guy.
Great idea. He buys into this and he tells his team. So we get the team to agree to this lunch and dinner, whatever you want to call it, with the understanding that the police are now going to look at them more favorable because they have always torn and they are revealing things and it will help, tourism. He has no idea that I had that footage. A year later, when we came back for Christmas to spend with him, he said, Bob, I agreed to that film, but I would never have agreed to that if I had known that you had that footage. That wasn't so good for me. Now so he was upset that I had kind of pulled the rug from under him.
Did these guys have any moves that you hadn't seen before? Like, you've been...
Yes.
Yeah, they did?
Yes. So they are able to, let's assume that the victim stands here on my left.
Okay.
And the pickpocket is here, like I am here now. And there's a pole here. The pickpocket hole, let's assume we're on a bus or in a supermarket, doesn't really matter. But I'm doing something with this hand here, that the thief can see up here in full view with everything here. And the victim is beside me, and he wants to go into his right pocket, whether it's hip or front, doesn't really matter. This hand, the right hand, goes behind, and he's able to go in with his right hand behind him into that pocket with a little bit of nudging.
Wow.
And now when we had the dinner with all of the thieves, they got so excited to show me the moves that one after another, they're jumping up and they're showing me this move. And I'm saying, they must have been doing this since they were 7 years old. There's nowhere in hell they could do that otherwise, if they were not doing it forever.
Right. I mean, they're reaching
no
behind their back, going into somebody else's pocket,
That's right.
grabbing the wallet.
In the opposite side.
Right.
In the opposite side.
It's That's crazy.
Now, did they have a few other things that were cute and so on, that I heard rumors of? So some of these guys, for example, I don't mean lately, but when they were in their prime, when they were maybe 29 to 30 years old, when Germany had big markets where they sold used cars, secondhand cars, where maybe 600 cars, over a weekend are suddenly sold in some sort of auction in Stuttgart or Berlin, whatever. There would be coming in very wealthy buyers from Russia, and they would buy lots of 60 cars or huge numbers, lots of it. And so suddenly there's a tremendous amount of money changing hands. So these dealers would be having maybe 500,000 on them or whatever, a lot of money. They would go to Switzerland and deposit, and they would, the crime syndicates would know where they would deposit because they didn't want the Russian regime to know where they parked their money.
Right.
So the thieves in Naples, the syndicate, would send teams in to surround this Russian guy, and lift it. And the moves that they did was because I happened to see one of those moves from a Swiss law enforcement film, when the guy comes in on a tram. And there are two guys on either side of this victim. And the way they did, there was none of this usual pickpocketing move. It was just, the elegance was unbelievable. I had to look at it at least 10 times before I could see what the hell did I see.
It's wild, the amount of skills. It's sort of a shame, right? Because these guys are in many ways as good as any world-class performer, but really they're just an inefficiency in the economy and stealing from people. I mean, do these guys express sort of remorse that this is all they really do for a living?
Yes, very much so. Because especially when they are hitting 45, 50, they feel that they have destroyed their not much reputation in the family, but respect from their children. Because the children today in modern Italy are going in a different direction. Either a priest takes care of them because they come from poverty, so sometimes there is a support system around them, and they feel that they have almost destroyed that respect from their own children towards them. And they would love to do something else if they could. And when I go and talk to them, it's very, very often the first thing we talk about is the unease inside. The same thing with some of the Romanians. For example, a Romanian thief, male, and some of them are very charming, by the way, and that goes with the territory. They're charming because they have to engrace themselves and read very quickly. There's a very good smile and like a ping pong, very quickly, boom, 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 back and forth. There's nothing slow. They say they can never tell a girlfriend that they are a thief, because the minute they do, the girl loses respect for them. And so it's very hard for them to build a natural, real, good relationship with someone.
That totally makes sense. I wonder, are these guys, are they faster than you? Are they the same speed as you? Do you think that you could, I'm wondering, like, what you see in terms of
here's
skill.
what you have to remember, that I have done this longer than any of these guys, because I don't have the fear factor of being serving time in jail.
That makes sense.
So I started at 18 and, I'm still doing it. So I have the psychological skills maybe better than they do. Meaning, as I evaluate my people, as I see them walking up on stage or whatever it is, or if I'm out in a law enforcement, there have been times, for example, in law enforcement some years ago, where in Latin America, they asked me, and I'm talking about not the law enforcement there, they were having banks where money from Colombia was deposited by drug cartel people, and the people that were in their country but belonging to the Colombian cartel, they were very vicious. They sometimes caught them garroting and doing very nasty things. But one of them, for example, was wearing a fake passport, and when he came in, it was so good that immigration could not detect that it was false, but they know it was false. They didn't want to go to the guy and say, we're going to grab your passport, because then they wouldn't know where it was made. They wanted to look at it without tipping off the other side. So they asked me, could I put together a team and steal the passport from this guy so that they could get their hands on it, in order to then, see, because they were concerned, of course, of, if this guy is making such good passport, is it made in Russia? Where are they made? And how come we can't detect the details?
So you got hired by a government to go steal a passport from another criminal.
Let's say that I won't go any further on this story.
Gotcha.
And so I want to say where it is, and nothing further. It's a semi-amusing up to this point anecdote, but we won't go beyond this part here.
But I get it, right? Because you all probably always wondered, all right, I'm on stage, I'm stealing belts, watches, whatever, but can I do it on the street?
I ask myself that all the time. All the time. Up until the film. By the way, it's shown in the film, because that was part of the film. I said to myself, can I or can I not do it as well as they do? And so I am doing it in the film, but there's a difference. I talked to the victim, and pickpockets don't. So, for example, there was an American or Canadian tourist entering up on a bus, and my little team, I said something to the guy. I said, "What's your hand there?" Or that bag is, a little small verbal thing to distract when I was lifting. Pickpockets don't talk. They lift and do everything silent. They may create a small diversion, but they're not, doing anything.
They're not chatty.
Yeah. So in some sense, you could say there are some thieves in Latin America and in Barcelona that come from South America, where they squeeze some pigeon poop on them from a little small bag. You don't sense it from behind. And then they wait 2 minutes or whatever, and they come up from another side and say, look, can I help you brush it off? So now they have verbal contact and they can touch here while they're doing the stealing. There are words going back and forth. But generally speaking, that does not happen. So my point here is, what can I do and what can I not do? Psychologically, yes. In terms of going to an inside pocket like the Russians can do, I couldn't do. I can bump into the guy as he's coming up on the ladder and there's a bit of a physical contact and lifting it. It's nowhere near as elegant as that guy. So there are certain moves and certain things that I do from pockets and so forth that are as good or better than 90% of street pickpockets. But if you measure me against the very, very best in each country, I'm going to be a couple of pinhole below.
Mm-hmm.
The good pickpocket respect me for my skill, and they say, Bob, I don't understand. How in the hell did you get this skill? They are in awe.
Right. Like, how do you practice without actually stealing?
Well, it wasn't, practice is maybe the wrong word, because there is no way you can practice. You do it in real thing. So you gradually do it. But in my case, when I was young, 25, 30 years old, they would catch me, in the middle of the show, say, hey, whatever. They would catch me and I would learn from my mistakes. It's obvious.
That's so interesting. I think the whole idea of being a professional stage pickpocket, finding the real street pickpockets, befriending them, and then learning their techniques and having that almost in the film, and I'll link to the film in the show notes because it's on YouTube, having almost like a trade convention at that cafe. I mean, that must have been, you looked like you were probably happier there than you probably have been in. It's got to be one of the top 10 experiences for you.
Funny you should say that, because sometimes I think back, what are the moments that in my life that have been unbelievable crowns of certain things. I had a very famous photographer who was my friend, Time Life, in 1963. And I was with him and one more photographer where the suicide burning of the monk in Saigon. So I took that picture with two of the other guys. That was the height. I didn't create that myself. It happened because at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was asked by this guy, do you want to come along, Bob? Come along, and they took out. I was there at the right moment. And then I had a guy called Lord Moynihan, a very famous financial advisor to a famous drug lord. At the time, he was my manager, not the drug lord, but the other guy.
Yeah, I assume.
And I got into the life, and that is created door openers for law enforcement later on. So there has been various moments in my life where unbelievable scenarios, the Teflon Don in New York, where I worked in a small club. I was working in Atlantic City for about 2 months, but never over the weekend because I wasn't big enough of a name. So my agent said, hey, I can book you in a club in New York on Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Sunday. I said, okay, great. I walked in, there. On the first day into this club, and it was maybe only 60 seats, they said, whatever you do, when you do your show at 11 o'clock, don't touch that table. You can't touch anyone at that table. I said, why is that? Never mind, don't touch anyone. So I'm doing my show, and halfway through, and gradually, it's a long table, 10 people or whatever, and there's a guy at the head, but they came in slowly during the evening. So in the beginning, there's no one, then 2, then 4, then 6, whatever. And these were guys, lieutenant of the crime syndicate in 1983 in New York when this took place, who controlled sections of New York.
So these are like Mafia 5 families guys.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And which is obviously why I wasn't supposed to touch anyone. So in the middle of my show, one of the guys said, you can't do that on me. That is so phony. There is no... And he kept taunting me, and he kept doing this. And finally, I said to myself, screw you, the management. I am going to take this guy up. And he has this shark fin, shiny gray suit. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That is so typical for they really hot stuff in those years. Yeah. And as I'm holding my hand on his left shoulder to sort of see his body language, so I am stealing with my right hand and I'm over here. And every time I move somewhere, he's right there with his hand. And then he smiles back to his guys over at the table, meaning, see, he's trying here, but I am one step ahead of him. So when I steal the tie, it's done from behind, from under the collar, gradually, slowed up. So I said to myself, I want to take the tie, but if I'm starting to put my hand here, he's going to feel it. So I pretend to go for something else, aiming all the time for the inside here. And all the time he's there. And every time he's making his move here, I'm jerking another half inch of the tie out of the knot. Finally, the whole skinny part is out. The knot is here, and the white part, and the rest is hanging behind. And I'm saying to him, so are you okay now? And he's looking down. Yeah, I'm okay now. Okay, you can go back. And as he's about to move, I steal the tie. He has no idea. Walks back, he sits down, and he goes, see, blah, blah, blah. And I'm holding it up. The rest, the 9 guys at the table, including the boss, they go absolutely apeshit of smiling. They think this is the funniest thing they've ever done. Now, from here on in, every weekend when these guys come in with new lieutenant, this guy is saying, make sure through the maitre d' that he takes one of my guys. They insist on it. At the end of my 2 months, I'm saying, sorry, this is my last now, whatever. One of them, not the main guy, calls me over to a side table, and he said, I want you to know, the boss here, he really likes you. Here's a name and a phone number. Whenever you run into any problem, just call this number and we'll take care of it.
Wow. I assume you never had to call that number.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I did have to use it as a mini threat. So I'm on the Royal Caribbean a few years later. That's a cruise ship, and I'm performing. And I'm doing it 2 weeks in a row. And there is a guy from Chile who is crew member on board, dancer or whatever, and they have a show for the audience where all of the people who work on board, who can, whether they're a singer, dancer, whatever, they do a 1-hour show. And this guy is doing a little magic show, and he steals one of my stunts, and he puts it into his show. And when I come back on board, the others, people who work on board said, he took it from your show. Maybe you shouldn't do it in your own show because the audience said, he took it from my show? What the hell do you mean? Yeah, he did. So I confront him. And he says, yeah, and what are you going to do about it? So the next week I come back, I say to these guys, his friends, every Saturday the ship are coming into Miami. And you have to get off your ship and you're going to buy some shaving cream and a newspaper and some fruit or whatever. You're going to go for here. I have a number here. And I may have to call in a favor if you don't take that thing off. And he took it off.
Because he didn't want to test you. That's funny. He probably thought, oh, this isn't real. Why would he have a Mafia number? And then he thought, do I want to play the odds on this one? I don't know. That's funny. I wonder if the number still works. You ever try it just to see if it still works?
I have friends who worked, sometimes did favors for them. And of course, when in the early time of my career, I worked at Latin Quarter in New York and a lot of those joints were run by. And if they liked you, and they asked you, they would forever ask you, they would have a bar mitzvah or a special birthday, they would fly you in and you would have them there, but you never got paid, but you were always asked, hey, do you want to be part of this? So I never called up that number. And further on, obviously, the secondary aspect of who is listening in, taping and whatever, you would have to be pretty stupid if you ask for a
That's
favor
a good point.
from one of those
Hadn't
guys.
thought about that. That's why I'm not a criminal. Did you ever find out who that boss was? Who was it?
Yeah, that was the Teflon Don.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
I mean, I only they never said. I just recognized. I mean, I looked at him and I could see, later from photos and so on. It didn't register on the day that I saw him, but then later when he was in the news, I put the 2 and 2 together.
So that's John Gotti for people who don't know, just in case you needed a more stereotypical.
He's not alive.
No. Yeah. No, but who knows? Who knows who picks up that phone now? It's probably a defunct bar that isn't there anymore. It's been 40 years.
Well, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. This is always fun. There's so much in. I'm telling people, definitely go into our show notes. Watch this film. We'll link up. It's probably still on YouTube, right? Is that National Geographic?
It's got like it has 8 million views.
Yeah.
It's called Pickpocket. If you do a search on YouTube, all you have to do is say Pickpocket King, those two words. You miss if you spell it wrong, you get some competitor, some guy who is unhappy that it has 8 million views. But no, it's very, very popular. You can also go to something called thiefhunters.com, spell that right. And there you have a site where we have catalogs of various things where we have met with things and, we reveal and how you should behave in different, it's a kind of almost like a podcast news things, little snippets with things. So there's a lot out there about me that you can search for.
Great. Bob Arno, thank you very much. We'll link to all your stuff in the show notes. This is always so fun and entertaining. And one day I hope to run into you and then see how this all works. Because, it's so hard to imagine it happening to you. But obviously, if you can do it to John Gotti, you can do it to anybody.